You know, there's a truth most people will never admit out loud. Sometimes the most painful distance you create is not from strangers, it's from your own family. And if that sentence makes you uncomfortable, good. Because today, we're not here for comfort, we're here for truth. Let me tell you something that might shock you. Empaths, the people who feel the deepest, love the hardest, and give the most, are often the ones who quietly walk away from the very people they were taught to never leave. Not because they are cold, not because they are ungrateful, but because they finally understand something most people never do. Love is not supposed to destroy you. From a young age, empaths are conditioned differently. They are the child who notices tension in the room before anyone speaks, the one who becomes the emotional caretaker even when they are just a kid. They learn to read moods, absorb pain, and fix what was never theirs to fix. And here's the dangerous part. They are praised for it. Such a good child, so understanding, so mature for their age, but what nobody sees is that this maturity is actually emotional survival. Now fast forward, that empath grows up. And one day something shifts. They start feeling exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. Drained after conversation, heavy after family gatherings, anxious before phone calls. And for the first time, a question appears in their mind: why do I feel worse after being around the people who are supposed to love me? That question changes everything. Empaths don't walk away because they are weak. They walk away because they have carried more than anyone ever noticed. They are the ones who stayed when leaving would have been easier. They are the ones who kept listening when no one ever listened back. They are the ones who kept understanding even when they were never understood. And here's the part that most people miss. Empaths don't break loudly. They don't slam doors. They don't create chaos. They break quietly, slowly, invisibly. Because their entire life they were taught that their role was to hold everything together. So they do. They hold the tension in conversations. They hold the pain of others. They hold the responsibility for emotions that were never theirs to carry. And they do it so well that no one ever asks if they're okay. That's how emotional overload begins. Not in one moment, but in 1,000 small ones. Every time they swallow what they really feel. Every time they say it's fine when it's not. Every time they excuse behavior that hurts them just to keep peace. They convince themselves it's love. They tell themselves this is what caring looks like. This is what loyalty means. This is just how relationships are. But deep inside, something starts to shift. A quiet exhaustion begins to grow, not the kind you fix with sleep, but the kind that sits in your chest, that follows you into silence, that makes even simple conversations feel heavy. And still, they don't leave, because empaths don't give up on people easily. They replay conversations in their mind, trying to understand. They search for reasons behind hurtful behavior. They make excuses that protect others while slowly destroying themselves. They didn't mean it. They're just going through something that I can handle it. But here's the truth. Every time they say I can handle it, they are pushing themselves closer to a limit they don't even realize exists. And when that limit finally arrives, it doesn't announce itself. There's no warning. Just a moment, a small, almost invisible moment where something inside them goes quiet. Peaceful quiet. Detached quiet, the kind of quiet where they stop reacting, stop explaining, stop trying. And if you've never experienced this, you won't understand how serious it is. Because when an empath stops trying, it means they've already tried everything. They've had every internal conversation. They've fought every emotional battle. They've cried in places no one ever saw. And now there's nothing left to give. This is emotional overload, not anger, not hatred, just emptiness. And emptiness is dangerous because it doesn't argue, it doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it just lets go. People often mistake this moment. They think the empath changed suddenly. They think they became distant for no reason. They think, why are you acting like this now? But what they don't realize is this didn't start now. This started months ago, maybe years ago. This is just the moment it became visible. Because empaths don't react at the first sign of pain. They endure it over and over again until enduring is no longer possible. And when that breaking point is reached, something powerful happens. For the first time in their life, they stop choosing others over themselves, not out of selfishness, but out of survival. They begin to see clearly. They see how much they gave without receiving. They see how often they were there without anyone being there for them. They see how much of themselves they abandoned just to keep others comfortable. And that realization, it's heavy because it comes with a painful question. Why did I accept this for so long? And that question can shake them. It can make them doubt themselves, blame themselves, feel ashamed for not walking away sooner. But here's what most people don't understand. Empaths don't stay because they're blind. They stay because they believe in people. They stay because they see potential where others see problems. They stay because they love deeply, even when it hurts them. So when they finally reach emotional overload, it's not because they didn't try hard enough. It's because they tried too hard for too long. And now their mind and body are forcing a decision they avoided for years. Distance. Not loud, not dramatic, just distance. They stop engaging in the same way. They stop explaining themselves over and over. But, they stop chasing connections that only existed because of their effort. And suddenly, people notice. Suddenly, the same people who ignored their pain start questioning their absence. Why are you so distant? You've changed, Daud. You're not the same person anymore. And they're right. They're not the same. Because the version of them that kept tolerating everything no longer exists. That version was built on overgiving, overthinking, and overfeeling without boundaries. And it couldn't survive. So it didn't. What replaced it is someone quieter, more aware, more protective of their energy. Someone who understands that constantly pouring into others while running empty is not kindness. It's self-neglect. And that realization changes everything. Because once an empath understands that their exhaustion is not normal, that their constant emotional weight is not something they were meant to carry, they can't go back to pretending. They can't unsee what they now feel so clearly. And that's why they walk away. Not because they are weak, but because staying would require them to keep breaking themselves in silence. And they've already done that for far too long. Family is supposed to feel like safety. But for many empaths, it feels like pressure wrapped in love. And that contradiction is where the confusion begins. Because when the people who are supposed to protect you are the same ones who drain you, your mind doesn't know what to believe. You're told this is your family. You're told they love you. You're told you should be grateful. So you try to ignore what you feel, but your body never lies. It tightens when certain names appear on your phone. It becomes restless before gatherings. It feels heavy after conversations that looked normal on the outside but felt suffocating on the inside. And you don't understand why. Because nothing obviously wrong is happening. No one is screaming. No one is hitting you. No one is openly rejecting you. But something feels off, and that something is emotional inconsistency. It's the kind of behavior that confuses your nervous system. One moment you're appreciated, the next moment you're criticized, one day you're included, the next day you're made to feel like you don't belong. Love comes, but it comes with conditions. Respect exists, but only when you behave the way they expect. And slowly, without realizing it, you start adjusting yourself. You become quieter, more careful, more aware of every word you say. You start walking on eggshells in a place that was supposed to feel like home, and that's where the damage begins. Because empaths don't just hear words, they feel intentions. They pick up on tone, energy, and unspoken tension. So even when everything looks fine, they feel everything that's not being said. They feel judgment behind compliments. They feel disappointment behind silence. They feel control hidden inside advice, and it exhausts them because they're constantly trying to stay emotionally aligned with people who are emotionally unpredictable. And the human mind cannot relax in unpredictability. It stays alert. It stays guarded. It stays in survival mode. That's why empaths feel drained after being around certain family members, not because they don't care, but because their system never gets to rest. They are always scanning, always adjusting, always trying to keep the emotional balance. And here's the hardest part to accept. This doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like normal because it's what they grew up in. So they normalize it. They say, That's just how they are. They don't mean it like that. I'm probably overthinking, but over time, the cost of that normalization becomes clear. They start losing themselves. Their opinions become filtered. Their emotions become suppressed. Their authenticity becomes conditional. They become who they need to be instead of who they truly are. And the scariest part is they don't even notice it happening until one day something small triggers something deep, a comment, a look, a familiar pattern repeating again, and suddenly they feel it all at once. The years of holding back, the years of adjusting, the years of pretending everything is okay. And in that moment, a realization hits them hard. This doesn't feel like love, not because there's no love, but because the love comes with a cost that requires them to silence themselves, shrink themselves, doubt themselves. And real love was never supposed to feel like that. That realization is uncomfortable because it challenges everything they've been taught. It forces them to question people they were told to never question. It makes them feel disloyal even for thinking about it. And that guilt is powerful. It pulls them back into the same cycle. Maybe I'm being too sensitive, Maybe I should just try harder. They're still my family, so they stay. They keep showing up, keep giving, keep trying to make it work. But something has changed now. They've seen the pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now every interaction feels heavier. Every inconsistency feels clearer. Every moment of discomfort becomes harder to ignore. And their inner voice, the one they've been silencing for years, starts getting louder, telling them this is not safe, this is not healthy, this is not how you deserve to feel. And for the first time, they start listening, not to what they were told, but to what they feel. And what they feel is misalignment. A deep, undeniable sense that something is wrong, even if it looks right on the surface. That's when the shift begins. They stop seeking approval in the same way. They stop explaining themselves endlessly. They stop sacrificing their peace just to maintain connection. And that shift changes how others respond to them, because people who benefited from their silence now feel their distance. People who were comfortable with their overgiving now feel their boundaries. And suddenly, the empath becomes the problem. You've changed, you're too sensitive, you're overreacting. But what's really happening is this. They are no longer tolerating what they used to survive. And that makes people uncomfortable, because when you stop accepting emotional inconsistency, you expose it without saying a word. And not everyone is ready to face that. So they push back, they guilt you, they question you. They make you feel like you're the one breaking the bond. But deep down, you know the truth. The bond was never stable to begin with. It only felt stable because you were the one holding it together. Mm-hmm. And now that you've stopped, everything reveals itself. That's the moment empaths begin to understand something most people never fully grasp. Love without emotional safety is not enough, because without safety, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no peace. Without peace, there is no real connection. And empaths, more than anyone, need that connection to feel real, not forced, not conditional, not one-sided, real, and when they realize they're not getting that, they stop chasing what was never truly there, not out of anger, but out of awareness. Choosing distance is one of the most misunderstood decisions an empath will ever make, because from the outside, it looks like rejection, but from the inside, it feels like survival. It doesn't start with strength. It starts with exhaustion, a deep, quiet exhaustion that no one else can see, because it was built behind smiles, patience, and endless understanding. Empaths don't wake up one day and decide to walk away. They arrive at that decision after years of staying when they should have left, after countless moments of choosing peace for others while losing it within themselves. They remember every time they ignored their own discomfort just to avoid conflict, every time they explained themselves hoping to finally be understood, every time they gave more, thinking maybe this time it would be enough. But it never is. Because when you are the one always adjusting, the relationship only works as long as you keep shrinking. And one day, something inside refuses to shrink any further. Not loudly, not dramatically, just firmly. A line is drawn not in anger, but in clarity, and that clarity is terrifying because it forces a truth they've been avoiding for years. I cannot keep doing this to myself. That sentence alone carries weight. It carries guilt because they were taught that putting themselves first is selfish. It carries fear because distance means change and change means uncertainty. It carries grief because even unhealthy connections still hold emotional history. So when an empath chooses distance, they are not just stepping away from people, they are stepping away from a version of themselves. The version that tolerated everything, the version that overgave without limits, the version that believed love meant sacrifice at any cost. Letting go of that version feels like losing a part of who they are. And that's why this decision hurts so deeply. Because it's not clean. It's not simple. It's not freeing at first. It feels heavy. It feels confusing. It feels like standing in the middle of two worlds, one that drained them and one they're not fully used to yet. And in that space, the guilt gets louder. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should go back and try again. Maybe I didn't do enough. That inner voice doesn't disappear overnight because empaths are wired to consider others even at their own expense. So even as they create distance, they feel the pull to return. They think about the good moments. They remember the times things felt okay. They question if they're making the right decision. And this is where most people break. They go back, not because things changed, but because the discomfort of distance feels unfamiliar. But the ones who keep going, the ones who stay in that uncomfortable space, begin to notice something slowly shifting. It's subtle at first, a moment of quiet that feels peaceful instead of empty, a conversation where they don't feel drained afterward, a day where they don't feel responsible for someone else's emotions. And it surprises them because for so long, they thought carrying everything was normal. Now, for the first time, they feel what it's like to not carry what was never theirs, and that feeling becomes clarity. They begin to understand that what they thought was love was often obligation. That, what they thought was connection was often dependency. What they thought was loyalty was often self-abandonment. And once that awareness settles in, everything changes because now going back doesn't feel like comfort anymore. It feels like losing themselves again. That's when distance transforms. It stops feeling like rejection and starts feeling like protection of their peace, protection of their energy, protection of their identity. They begin to rebuild something they never fully had before, a sense of self that isn't defined by how much they give to others. They start asking themselves new questions. What do I feel? What do I need? What do I want? Without considering everyone else first. And at first, they don't even know the answers because they've spent so much of their life focused outward, they forgot how to look inward. But slowly, patiently, they learn. They learn that their emotions matter, that their boundaries are valid, that their peace is not something they have to earn. And this learning process is powerful because it breaks a cycle that may have existed for years, even generations, a cycle where love meant sacrifice. Where silence meant respect, where endurance meant strength. They begin to see that true strength is not in how much you can Arabic to Arabic it, Arabic meme, Arabic lamb, but in what you refuse to tolerate. And that shift changes how they show up in every relationship. They no longer over-explain themselves. They no longer chase validation. They no longer stay where they feel unseen. Not because they stopped caring, but because they started caring about themselves too. And that balance is something they never had before. Of course, not everyone will understand this. Some people will call it selfish. Some will call it cold. Some will say they've changed. But what they don't realize is this change was necessary because the version of the empath that existed before was slowly disappearing under the weight of everyone else's expectations, and choosing distance brought them back to themselves, back to their truth, back to a life where they don't have to constantly recover from the people around them. And that's not rejection, that's survival, that's growth, that's awakening. At the end of it all, the empath finally understands something that changes everything. You cannot heal in the same place that keeps hurting you. And once that truth becomes real, distance is no longer a choice. It becomes the only way forward.